Thank you for joining us at the Generation Green 2021 Youth Conference. This segment of the international panel is brought to you by Tina Oh. Tina is an immigrant from Korea and has accomplished many amazing things here in Canada. Enjoy her story and what she has to say.
Hi folks, so nice to be able to connect with you virtually. Thank you so much for inviting me to the Generation Green virtual conference so we can chat about how to build a better and stronger and bolder climate justice movement that ensures a more compassionate, a more equitable and healthy world for all of us. My name is Tina Oh. I'm a climate and migrant justice organizer. I'm currently recording from Treaty 6 territory, Jutsice, Edmonton, Alberta. So I've been given 3 questions and only 10 minutes to talk about them, so we'll just do a big deep dive. The first question is, what do you think are top priority climate injustices in Canada, and how would you advise youth to take action to achieve climate justice in our country? So yeah, very big question. Something I've been thinking a lot about is that we're living in a time of compounding crises. The climate crisis, the global pandemic, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, Two-Spirit people, police brutality, and an abysmal job market for young people with skyrocketing tuition costs. And with each crisis, we're seeing just how truly normalized injustice and inequities are built into these systems and our everyday lives. The science is very clearly showing us that we need to act boldly now and transform literally life as we know it to mitigate the worst impacts of climate change. It's not too late, but we do need to act now. Instead, our government bought a pipeline and continues to give massive tax breaks to the fossil fuel industry and attacks Indigenous nations like Wet'suwet'en Nation up in what is known as northern British Columbia for resisting encroachment on their lands at sites of resource extraction, bulldozing down their consent. Now, this is some of the most vile climate injustices happening in this country. But what's really powerful about using climate justice as a lens to understanding what actions we need to take is that we see that we need to change everything, and we can't leave anyone behind. And there's so much hope in this, because climate justice means recognizing that we have an opportunity to create a future that works for all of us. We have the solutions that Indigenous knowledge demands, and the technology already exists to make those changes. We just need the political will. We can mitigate some of the worst impacts. Again, it's not too late. As young people coming and working together, that's what's really going to propel and give us the energy to do this work in the long term. And we do need to be committed for the long term. Climate change is for the long haul. Working together is going to give us a far better chance to enact change than doing anything we can possibly do alone. So join your local climate group or start one with your friends. And I know this sounds cheesy, but be open to meeting new people and making new friendships. In these groups, talk about what worries you most about climate change, what you think climate justice means. And I think those answers are going to reveal what you're most passionate about as a group and give you some direction. Maybe that looks like starting or joining a community garden. Maybe it looks like a support circle on how to talk to family members about these issues. There's definitely not simple issues when we're talking about them with family and friends who might disagree with us. Maybe it's a support circle on climate anxiety. Those are just examples, but again, just the breadth of the work that we're able to do. Another piece of advice is to go seek out mentors and movement leaders that are talking boldly about climate justice near where you live. They're going to share with you their mistakes and their wins and their advice. And it's important to honor the work that's been done, because that's what's enabling us to do the work that we're about to do. A really beautiful and incredible thing about the climate justice movement is that so many young people are already leading the work. Capitalism has made us think that there's never enough action, never enough people in the movements, never enough anything, but that's not true at all. There's so many brilliant people doing the work and doing what they can, and we can get inspired by their work, see what works well and what doesn't, and adapt that to our local situations. Question 2. What's one piece of advice you would give youth when trying to engage parts of their community who aren't particularly engaged or don't see the urgency of climate change? Now, this is a really important question because we need to be thinking about this constantly. How can we build this movement? How can we bring more people into it? How do we get people to feel ownership in taking action and believe in collective power to enact change? In order to take effective action, we need to learn who and what institutions hold enormous powers that allow this business as usual to continue. We are in a climate crisis, and we needed to act years and years and years ago. We do need to build our understanding of power because effective action for climate justice isn't simply about right and wrong. I think we all have people in our lives that aren't particularly engaged or might not see the urgency of climate change. They might not be engaged. These people aren't bad people. They're not necessarily ignorant. They are our friends and they are our family and our classmates and neighbors, and it's okay that they disagree. What we do know is that we're on the right side of history, but for many people it's not that simple. And we need to ask ourselves, how can we articulate climate action in ways that resonate with people and meet them where they're at, especially people who might on the surface seem disengaged. When we look at things like climate denialism, it's not actually about truth or science. It's about power, and it's often about the profit that people with power reap when they ensure that business as usual carries on. So it's okay to redirect and focus our energies on things that just might be a better use of our time. Maybe our energies are not best spent arguing with strangers on the internet. Maybe it's not best spent with someone who denies and trolls despite knowing better. Think about where we hold influence. Think about the people who will listen in good faith. The networks that come to my mind are family and friends, classmates, colleagues at work. They might disagree, and that's totally okay, and that's actually an essential part of growing our movement, is disagreement and being able to talk to those who disagree with us. Question 3. What are some ways that today's youth can be heard when it comes to speaking about climate change? So again, this goes back to my previous answer, which is that we need to think about those in our spheres of influence. If we're struggling with talking to the folks who trust us, who care about us, how are we supposed to talk to strangers? We need to practice talking and engaging people into struggle, especially those who disagree. And when we speak to more and more people, then that enables us to go back to the drawing board and reassess how this is going to inform our activism. Advocacy and activism all too often looks like rallies and protests, but our success is not measured by how many people have their hands on a megaphone. It's about how many people we've grown into our movement, and every single person counts. The movement for climate justice is so ripe with opportunities for a better world. Some say that focusing too much on climate justice makes climate action a harder sell, but they're wrong. When communities with the most to gain lead, they fight to win. Justice is much more than a moral imperative. It's a winning strategy. Thanks so much for having me.
This segment of the International Panel is brought to you by Ashneil Jeffers. Ashneil is an environmentalist and businessman from Montserrat in the Caribbean. Enjoy his story and what he has to say.
Hey there, my name is Ashneil Jeffers. I'm a 22-year-old from the small island of Montserrat. And that's an island in the Caribbean. It's about 40 square miles in size, and we have about 4,500 people. So you've probably never heard of us, but we're a nice little island. We celebrate St. Patrick's as a national holiday, and we're one of the few islands that actually do that, and we have a whole bunch of celebrations. I would invite you to come anytime you have the chance. So I'm an environmentalist in the Caribbean. I'm also a businessman who does things with online e-commerce, cryptocurrency, motivational and public speaking, and a little bit of politics. but generally I'm an all-roundish kind of guy. But I'm really into the environment, and the reason why is because back in 2016, I had a project for college. Well, less a project, a mandatory service where you have to go and put in some hours volunteering for something. And I decided that, hey, well, since I have to do it, might as well just do something that sounds cool. So there was this organization called Coral Cake Conservation, and yeah, we just learned how to go and do environmental stuff. They managed to teach me how to go and hike. Well, not teach me how to hike, but more teach me about the wildlife of Montserrat a lot more on land. And then they taught me how to swim after a while. And then I learned how to dive, and I really got into conservation after that. Since then, I've spent the last nearly 5 years now just traveling all over the world, doing things for climate change. I've been to about 17 countries in total, and half, if not over half of them, have been directly related to climate change, or most of them have been somewhat related to climate change in some way. And honestly, it's been an amazing experience being able to travel to so many countries and be able to talk to so many people and understand so many different cultures. It's something that you don't see every day. And it's definitely something that I would encourage everybody here to go and do, to learn more about other countries and other realities. So let's get into some of the questions that I got. The first one was, how was my daily life impacted by the events of climate change, both for me personally and in my community? And for me personally, it has affected me, but it's more like with the temperature. It's a little bit hotter, and it's obvious because you can see it on your phone, on your app, and stuff like that. And when you compare it to other numbers in the past, but right now, I wouldn't say it's like, oh, I'm out here, like, it's crazy. But that's me. And I'm a young person. I don't really do as much of the traditional things like fishing, farming, and stuff like that. I'm more about a computer kind of guy behind my laptop. So I wouldn't really see the effects just yet. But with other people in my community, they have seen the effects, especially people like farmers, fishers. For example, fishers, they have to go further out to sea to be able to catch smaller fish, literally. In the farming section, there's insects. So some insects that might not normally be here due to hotter temperatures, they can start coming. And two, though it hasn't happened yet, there's a lot of potential for insects to actually die out as the temperatures continue to increase. Another point that is very unfortunate that is happening right now is also an increased level of fear in general, and that's because of the hurricane season. So if you don't know, between June to October, the end of October every year, there's in the Caribbean, Latin America, there's something called the hurricane season, and that's when there's an increased chance for hurricanes, tropical storms, tropical cyclones, and those kind of stuff. And what happens is that you basically just playing Russian roulette, where if okay, yeah, these 6 months pass, or however long it is, and you don't get hit by a hurricane, thank God you didn't get hit. But then chances are probably one of your brother or sister islands got hit. And then the bigger problem is that next year, what happens next year? The same thing over and over and over again. And with climate change now, we've actually noticed that hurricanes have been increasing, that the frequency have been increasing. You see where I said that normally your hurricane season lasts from June till October, end of October? Well, it happened early last year in terms of like for the last couple of years now, hurricane season has started earlier. It starts probably around May now. The first hurricane is forming around May, maybe a bit earlier. And then the hurricane season last year was extended till the end of November. And that's a very, very troubling sign. Like, you don't even know how scared you can get during a category, even a category 3 hurricane. We never even talk about category 5. When your roof gets torn off, and you're seeing like just things just flying around and you're at risk of dying, literally, that's when you know that you're experiencing a hurricane. And that's what we're gonna experience more in the Caribbean, in southern parts of America, in Latin America, and maybe even more countries. Because the problem is as well is that with climate change, hurricanes are also becoming stronger and they can last longer. So, so the second question was about COVID-19 and the psychological effects of COVID-19 and how it will affect the mental health state of it. I'm not a professional in any sort of way. I just know from experience and from friends and so on. But one thing I have done is some research, simply Google and looking online and so on. And one of the studies, well, not one of the studies, a lot of studies show that with the increase of things like pandemics, uh, diseases, hurricanes, droughts, famines, all of that, and all of those are very real effects of climate change that will happen if things aren't stopped, if it will stop. And with all of that comes with mental health effects, things like PTSD, anxiety, depression. We say them all the time and we talk about them all the time and we say, yeah, 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 anxiety, depression, take some meds or whatever, but it's way more than that, you know? When you lose your home to a hurricane and have it destroyed, when you lose your family to a disease forever, like we can say, oh yeah, our sympathies go out to you, when we hear it on the radio, when we hear it on the TV, on internet, on news or whatever. But we kind of get desensitized to the entire thing in the first place. Somebody can die online, and we're just like, oh yeah, our sympathies, and that's all. I mean, what more can we really do online, But I just really want to raise more awareness of the problem in the first place. I think that one of the major problems is that we don't understand mental health and we don't understand just the level of impact on productivity that we have, and like how it feels like as a person to actually be the one going through this mental health crisis, to be one of the victims of this mental health crisis. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's only just increased it because, as usual, it's the poorer countries that get most affected by all of this. And it's such a shame. The thing is that I don't want to scare you at the same time. I think that, oh yeah, all hope is lost, and then add more to any sort of anxiety, any sort of depression that you may have regarding to this. And that where I come with the last question is, what would I say to a struggling teenager who has anxiety about climate change? And honestly, first things first, seek a professional. Seek somebody who you can trust, you can confide in, and talk to them about it. If you need to talk to a climate change expert, talk to one. If you need to hit me up, hit me up. I don't mind sending a text or whatever, because it's serious. And don't take your anxiety or depression lightly. Don't say that, oh yeah, it's just anxiety, it's just depression. It is not just anxiety and depression. Those are one of the leading causes of premature death, probably all over. There's some studies, for example, that it's fourth in the US for depression and the seventh for anxiety in the leading causes of premature death. So please, if you need help, seek help. And I'm very serious about this. Because we need your empathy. Because you actually care about the environment, and we need more people like you. I think that all of us here, we're young people. I'm 22, and I'm still here trying my best to go and do my own business stuff to be able to then be able to make a change in the society that I live in, and hopefully in the world too. And we need more people like you to be able to come up with more ideas. If you're in your room, you don't have much to do during this lockdown, think of some ideas. Don't taboo business. Don't say, oh yeah, the corporations are the ones that that caused this entire mess. Yeah, the bad ones are. The bad ones are. And you have to make that distinction between the bad stuff and the good stuff. If we pile all business, if we pile all government, if we pile everything into one section and say, yes, this is the culprit, and then we focus all our attention on destroying this culprit, then what happens if it's more complicated than that? Then we just end up fighting something but not being very clear and very direct about what we're fighting, you know? So we need you to first educate yourself in terms of speaking to people outside of your group, outside of your skin tone, outside of your culture, outside of your language, if you can. And really trying to understand where these people are coming from because they're all humans. No matter what anybody else tells you, no matter what whoever says, we're all humans.
This segment of the International Panel is brought to you by Marinel Ubaldo. Marinel is one of the founders of the Youth Leaders Environmental Action Federation. She is a very accomplished environmental activist from the Philippines. Enjoy her story and what she has to say. Thank you.
Hey everyone, so I'm Marinel Ubaldo. I am from the Philippines. I am an international climate justice advocate. I am a social worker in the Philippines, and I am now working for Living Law Jutsice as ecological justice campaign coordinator.
So the first question is, how has climate change impacted your life personally, and how has it impacted your community?
Here in the Philippines, we're suffering from climate disasters, from the effects of climate change every day of our lives, because we're living it day by day. It is very hard to predict what will be the weather tomorrow because of climate change. What would happen tomorrow because of climate change? I think that's one of the things that is really like impacting us, because a lot of people here in the Philippines are just so close. They have this intimate relationship with the environment, since a lot of people are relying entirely on the environment. They're fishermen, they're farmers, and it is just hard to predict now when will it be good for them to go to the sea to have fish, to catch a fish, or when it will be good for them to plant some vegetables or um and every day we tend to think what would be the best coping mechanism if there will be a disaster, because now we're having more stronger typhoons. Now we're having frequent stronger typhoons and frequent floods, frequent climate disasters. Now when there is a typhoon season, it seems like they are they're doing it all together, like they're striking communities consecutively, and they are more stronger, they're more monstrous, and they're more killing people, and they're more killing livelihood and houses of people. So I think like here everyone is just suffering from climate impacts every day of our lives, especially those been who have this kind of relationship with the nature. Like my father is a fisherman. I know a lot of farmers, and it's just hard for them to make a living when climate change is here. I mean, if we are suffering from the effects, though scientists have been saying that the Super Typhoon Haiyan, the strongest typhoon ever recorded in human history, was not yet an effect of climate change. However, it was exacerbated by it. It was exacerbated by climate change because of the ocean warming. So I want these people to know what's happening now, because I have talked to so many people, especially the elders, and whenever I talk about why is it that there is a sea level rise, why is it that the sea is already on their front yard, though it was not there before, it was still far before, but because they're living on the shore, the sino is in on their front yard. And when I told them that that is because of sea level rise, that is because the glaciers are melting, they're like surprised that there is a reason for that.
And the second question is, what do you feel is the best method to educate others regarding climate change and its impacts?
Really depends on who are your audience. Like here in the Philippines, there's still a lot of people, especially in the grassroots, who do not know about climate change. Whenever you ask them what might be the reason why there are stronger typhoons, they would always relate it um to like the throwing garbages everywhere, or through getting more plastics, which can be linked, but they are different kind of problem. I mean, plastic pollution can be a different kind of problem. Their problem, they can be an effect of like if there is already a typhoon and there is a storm surge, that is a problem because all of this waste could go to your house and could just just destroy everything. But they really don't know what's behind it, the science about it. I think in my experience in educating communities, it is very, very important to laymanize these terms, to laymanize, to simplify um, the complex content of climate science, because not everyone could understand what's happening. Not everyone could understand climate change and the complexities of it. We have been suffering from climate change for how many years, and that is the reason why I feel offended whenever there are people who are trying to deny climate change, because I feel like this fight is very personal for me, because I've seen a lot of people who died because of climate change. My family came back to zero. We didn't have a house, we didn't have anything because of climate change, because of climate change effects. So for me, one of the things really is to educate people about climate change. And one way to do that is to simplify, contextualize climate change concepts, and what we could do to protect more the nature. Because there's already initiative on the grassroots. There are already initiatives that is being implemented by grassroots people, by residents, community residents, by grassroots organizations. They just have to, to be supported more, so they could have more knowledge on how to implement such projects. Because we cannot deny these people in the grassroots that they know what is best for them. They know what is the best solution to the problem in their communities. And it is just right that they could be supported in their own initiatives. Because, like, as I worked in the humanitarian sector, I have realized that it is very important that the initiative projects is being initiated by the people, so that it would be more sustainable and they can have the ownership to the problem.
For our last question, if you had to pick one main message to present to today's youth, the most important piece of information to inspire new people to join the climate justice movement, what would it be?
Change, if you think that climate change is not existing just because you are not directly being hit by the effects of it, then you should feel privileged, because you are still thinking twice if it's existing or not. Because in the other side of the world, we don't have any choice but to really adapt and mitigate its effects, because there is no other choice for our survival. So you're really privileged to still think, to still have that doubt if climate change exists. And to inspire new people to join the movement, it is, for me, it is very important that you think about what could be the future that you want for yourself and for your children, because the motivation could be founded from there. If you want a future that is good for your children, that is healthy for your children and for yourself, you have to start doing something now, because your action now could be lead to something greater or something worse in the future. I want to tell the youth of today that whatever you're doing for the environment now, you're not just doing it for yourself or for your family. You are already doing it for people living in the vulnerable countries. You're doing it for people who are already suffering from climate change now, because we're all connected. Whatever you do for the environment, it goes back to you 10 times. And that is not, you're not just the one being affected by it, but the whole people, especially those living in the vulnerable countries, because yet we are not contributing that much to the carbon emission, yet we are suffering so much from it, from a phenomena that we even haven't caused. My message would be, whatever you do for the environment, you're not just doing it for yourself now. You're doing it for your future. You're doing it for other people in vulnerable countries. You're doing it for the world. You're not just doing it for yourself. So be part of the movement, because we all have to get on board.
Thank you so much for listening to Ashneil Jeffers, Tina O, and Marinel Ubaldo talk about climate change and its impacts. If you want to take climate action, don't forget to register for the project launch to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You can find the registration link on the main page. Thank you.